Hi, friends. I'm really excited to be here with you and really excited to speak to my next guest and about the topic she has to share. So I'm just going to introduce her and then we'll get right into it. This is Laura Jane. She has invested over 3,000 hours of individual learning and research that included many rabbit holes, dead ends regarding private member associations, which is what we'll be talking about today, and living in the private. She uncovered a few false promises and profits. Her experience, perseverance, tenacity, intuition, and dissatisfaction over the past few years drove her to find golden nuggets of information that led to creating a business model to help others thrive in sovereign potential within the private domain. Laura Jane also has extensive background in coaching, one-on-one and group facilitation, teaching, leadership, development, and empowerment through passion. She is also a published writer and has studied a number of disciplines and special interests in Canada and the US. Laura Jane has a background in management within the public service, nursing, energy medicine, designing educational software, as well as member she's a member of several national and international PMAs herself. So welcome, Laura Jane.
Thank you, Angela. What a beautiful introduction.
Thank you. It's great to have you and your kitty in the background as well. Mine might show up too.
Oh,
So let's start at the beginning. There's going to be a lot of questions I want to cover. But I want to get a background from what kind of got you into this, and can you walk us through your journey of opening your tea room with your and bakery with your mother, and what did that experience teach you?
oh, great. Thank you. That was quite a while ago, but
Yeah.
yes, I did. I had always wanted to do entrepreneurial and have my own business because I don't do well under a lot of authority, which is ironic because I ended up in the Ontario government for 20 years. However,
Wow.
I opened a tea room with my mom, Tea Room Bakery, and we were doing extremely well. It's unheard of to go from the red to the black in under 6 months, and we did just that. But what happened was it was a small town in southwestern Ontario, and we ticked off another vendor, another restaurant, and we ended up being persecuted by the health inspector. We were constantly having a health inspector show up almost weekly, taking the temperature of our refrigeration unit, swabbing all of our sinks and everything and the bathrooms, and ironically, the swabs they took from our tea room came back the cleanest they've ever seen in any establishment was food. And so they couldn't close us down on that. But they kept coming back and coming back and coming back. And finally, they found some trumped up order that they managed to get us. And I think it was on, she came in one day and the refrigeration was like 2 degrees off or 3 degrees off. And she immediately put in an order. We later found out after the tea room closed, we later found out that she had accepted bribes
Oh.
from this competitor, and we were going to go after her, but my mom, by that time her health had failed, and I
Mm,
didn't want to put her through it. So we've kind of got drummed out of town. And
yeah.
so it wasn't great. We did have a B&B in northeastern Ontario for a while, but that just got to be too much.
Mm,
So I've been on the
mhm.
receiving end of what the public pressure can do to
Right.
some to anyone that's hardworking, doing and contributing
Yeah.
good things.
Right.
And so I thought there's got to be more to this. We are built to survive. We are built to thrive, really.
Yeah.
And why should this one agent who was taking a bribe have the ability to close me down over some stupid rule that, I mean, flew in the face of all the results they got? you
Yeah.
know and so that kind of ticked me off, and as I went through and I started working for the Ontario government, I said, "Oh, now I know where the corrupt," you know, and so that was really the key for me was, okay, I spent a long time learning how all of this happens and where it comes from and legislation and how they took liberties, that they had no
Mhm.
right to take, and how they would manipulate the system to bring it against the man or woman that was
Mhm.
just trying to earn a living, and not even earn a living. We shouldn't even have to earn a living. We were meant to be abundant. So it's only the public sector that has caused us to realize that, or to have this mind control that we have to earn a living. We have to
Mhm.
go out there, slave all day, and then, to
Mhm.
get a pittance. So
Mhm.
it just sent me down another. So I started looking into sovereignty, of course, and freedom. And I came across David Edwards, who was a former lawyer who started a private member association training out of the US. And so I studied with David Edwards because I liked what he was saying. I love the freedom.
Yeah.
And now the problem I found with David Edwards was that he was a lawyer. So a lot of his PMA course for me still felt like I was dabbling in a lot of legalese, and
Yep.
still kind of in the public sector as opposed to moving totally into the private or the public jurisdiction instead of moving into the private jurisdiction. And it was also very American. So everything was based on the US corporate structure. So I found a graduate of his, Jackie Milne, who's actually in Canada and she's Canadian. So I studied with Jackie. I joined her PMA and learned lots. And then but it still had that, you relying on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and all that. And by this time, I was down the rabbit hole with Mark Passio on natural law, and David Straight and a few others. And so I really said, why is the PMA not based strictly on natural law, completely in the private jurisdiction? Why are we still feeling that we must answer to the public, jurisdiction?
Mhm.
And so I created a private member association training program based strictly on natural law. And that's how it all started. And now that's what I'm doing as well. I have a class underway right now where I've
Yeah.
got folks from Quebec, Ontario, and British Columbia all taking part. And next week they get to present their PMAs to us, so
Wow.
they get to practice their pitch,
Yeah.
next week. So yay,
Amazing. That's
yeah,
amazing. Well, what an interesting journey, and it's funny that well, unfortunate that you had to go through that, you and your mom, but,
yeah,
everything happens for a reason, and,
mhm,
I'm glad you transmuted that experience into something positive now
yeah,
in helping yourself and other people, other men and women, I should say, in this
yeah,
area. Interesting that you should have been in government and and going down these rabbit holes, kind of a dichotomy of experiences
yeah,
there.
yeah. Let's explore
Um,
both sides thoroughly.
yeah, exactly. Might as well. Helps your understanding. So, we talked a lot about so for anyone listening, they might not be familiar with you mentioned the private domain, the public domain, jurisdictions. Can we get an overview of what the definition of private versus public is and some examples of that just to clarify things for anyone listening?
Okay. We live in the public sector, and you can think of the public jurisdiction. Public jurisdiction you can think of as the government jurisdiction. That is all based on laws and statutes that are man-made. This is where we register, we seek permission for everyone. It's a child mindset. They've brainwashed us and kept us controlled to believe that we are incompetent, we are unworthy, and we need a big brother to watch over us so that we don't kill each other, and we support each other, which is sad because they do that. They don't,
Yeah.
but that is the public jurisdiction. And that's the one we're used to living in with our driver's licenses, registering a marriage, registering your children. When we register, we basically are seeking permission to exist out of the government and we're giving them control. And so that is the public jurisdiction. And that's where you have courts, and that's where um, there's a lot of room for corruption there because it's very ego driven. When
Mhm.
you move into the private is you functioning in honor and living a moral. It's based on essentially do no harm. And
Yeah.
when you live in the private, do no harm, and that means no trespass, no theft, no lying. And you are but you exercise free will completely, and there is no rules or controls other than those that are for the betterment of man and woman. So the private sector is the adult mindset where you self govern, where you take responsibility for your actions and the consequences of those actions, and you do no harm. You do not do anything that will bring harm to another man or woman. So that's the difference between the public and that. And in the private, you are expected to make remedy. If you do
Mm.
cause harm, I mean, you're not shot, but you but you do have the opportunity to make remedy. In other words, you have the opportunity to make it right and
Yes.
to correct your error. So you have that coming forward. So and it's based on natural law. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's why I went that way. And how I got into the natural law from the PMA perspective, I read the court jurisdiction where the judge said he had no right to interfere in the private jurisdiction. He had no authority.
Mm.
And so I read all of that case, and I made sure that any paperwork I developed was based on what he said kept him from
Mhm.
interfering with that association. So all the
Right.
paperwork is very much so that a judge cannot possibly interfere with what you're doing. That
Right.
keeps government overreach and statutes out of your private member association, as long as you stay private, you know,
Right.
and
Yeah.
you don't cross over into the public domain.
Right, and they can't cross into the private either, so that's
That's right.
what
They have
keeps you
no
safe. Yeah.
jurisdiction. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And for people listening, jurisdiction
Sorry,
is
my
just yeah.
my cat's going to
Yeah, I
bed.
see I see it under the covers. "It's playtime now."
Yeah.
That's fine. Um, and jurisdiction just means the authority that
Yeah,
the governing bodies have over certain
right.
areas and, uh, yeah, right?
And
That's what that
yes, it
means.
does. And the public jurisdiction would have no authority if we just did not consent.
That's true. That's true.
People don't realize it's as simple as saying, no, I
Yeah.
do not consent to being in contract with you. And everything in the private or the public jurisdiction is really based on contract and commercial law. That's
Yes.
everything in
Mhm.
in the public. It's all based on dollars. That's
Yeah,
the only,
and it's
whereas
based
in the
on
private is
statutes and codes and
yeah, yeah.
ordinances and mandates, which are not law, I found out. So
No,
law
mandates are not
requires
law.
a victim, right? And
Yep.
those
Yeah.
codes and things, they do not have that. They do not fall
They
meet the
will
definition.
yes, they
Yeah.
will persecute and put you in jail for a victimless crime.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. So the private is different because do no harm, there's only really one law, do no harm and,
Yep.
like, don't defraud me, don't murder me, don't take my stuff, like,
Right.
basically is
And don't
it.
trespass. In other
Don't
words,
trespass, yeah,
don't come on to my or try to seize my property without my permission. That's what
right.
trespass means. In legalese, it's trespassing. In
Yes.
natural law, it's trespass. And it is the worst that you can do in natural law is
Wow.
trespass because trespass includes theft.
Yes.
So if you trespass on my offspring, my son or daughter, then you have created a, a, a very bad crime, and they trespass on our offspring all the time, but that's because we put them in school, we've signed our kids over to school,
Mm,
and they act as the parent, and they realize they go in and can take your kids, and
yeah,
you say, "No, you have no right," and they'll just show you a contract or a signed registration form and say, "Yeah, we have
yeah,
every right under our statutes and laws, which you agreed to
that's it.
unknowingly when you signed those forms." Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's what I was gonna say. It's that
yeah,
tacit agreement that you don't even
yeah,
know that you've got that, and it's
yeah,
all based on a contract, whether you know you're in that or not. It's
yeah,
yeah,
and acquiescence by staying silent. Yeah,
that's true, that's true.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, so, we covered public and private. I like that you said child mindset versus adult mindset. That makes it kind of pretty clear,
yeah.
actually. That's a good way to think about it. I think people are wondering that are listening to this, well, it's like, well, what kind of remedy do you have? Like, if something goes wrong, and we'll talk about. I would like to get into after this question about the history of the PMA and how it's actually defined and things like this, but I first want to address this question of, well, if I'm in the public, there are courts and I can take someone to court if they don't pay me or if they don't finish a job or whatever happens. What kind of remedy do you have in a PMA situation?
A PMA situation involves going through a remedy process. So you bring forward a claim against you if you've been harmed. So you would bring it forward. And then that claim would be reviewed. And within the PMA, you have a tribunal. So you bring your claim in, and then if the claim is found to be valid and substantiated where there was harm, then there will be consequences. So it could be demanding of funds. It could be, you know, it could be anything that would result in a remedy of that harm. And that would be enforced by the leadership of the uh, private member association. If the member said, no, 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 I'm not getting what I want to sue them, I want to take them into the public court, you, as the leader of that PMA, have certain actions you must take in order to allow that to happen. And the first must be that you release the offending member from your private member association, because they
Mm,
cannot be taken into court as long as they are under the protection of the PMA. So
I
you
see.
have the ability to expel them from the PMA. And once they're expelled, it's up to that member if they want to pursue something in court. But they would have to bring out all of their claim and make the
Mhm.
claim in court. And of course, he who claims must prove.
Right.
So that's up to you.
Does
Um, Go ahead.
does that mean that, once that member is released and they take this into the public courts, does that then mean that they cannot call upon any witnesses or anybody else from within that PMA association to come into court? Is that correct, or
Well,
how does that work?
they will put their case forward, but the when you go into a private member association, you sign, or you autograph your member agreement, and within that member agreement, you agree not to hold the PMA liable or your
Mm,
fellow members liable. It is because what you're saying is we're all going to act in honesty, we're all going to
mhm,
act in the private, and we're going to stay in the private, we're going to resolve our issues in the private, you know.
okay.
And so that's where it goes. But if they do go into the public court, um, and against a member that, say, they went into a, see, it's not the PMA that will manage the member to member part. That is
Okay,
member to member. Everybody's equal in a PMA. And
I
so
see.
if I choose to engage with another member that I met in the PMA is not going to administer that. That's up to you and your fellow member. It's like going into a private
Mhm,
agreement with somebody. And
mhm,
so when you're in that private agreement, it is not in that agreement through the PMA. You are man to man, woman to woman, woman to man, whatever. But you're going into it as a private man or woman with another private man or woman. So if
Okay.
you choose, but not the PMA, so it's like the PMA is there to bring the members together. What each member engages in, like I've worked with a lot of health PMAs,
Yes.
and so when you get into that, you may discover that one of the members does Reiki. Okay,
Mhm.
so you may want to engage that member privately with Reiki and make arrangements with them. That is not within the PMA. The PMA is not going to administer that. That will
Mhm.
be between you and that other member privately. And so you can go forward with. Now, if in that private arrangement something happens and you're dissatisfied, that's when you may want to pursue. But because we are saying you're all adults here, you are self governing, you are entering into and you're asking for this other member to give you something, but you're doing it fully informed and fully aware as a man or woman. So you're going to take the consequences of that decision you made. Now, it doesn't mean that if they cause great harm that you have no consequences. You need to pursue that. So yeah, they can take it in, but
Mm.
the chances are they're not going to get other witnesses from within the
No.
PMA because it was a one-on-one kind of arrangement
Gotcha.
and it was done in the private. It wasn't done in the
Right.
public. Yeah.
Okay.
Does
So
that does
okay.
that
So there.
explain that to you, Angela?
Yeah.
Does
So
that
there
make
is some
sense?
remedy. Yeah. There is some
Yeah.
remedy, and
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 we're so brainwashed to think that only a court can give us remedy. And that's
right.
not, we can get remedy between ourselves. We do it all
Right.
the
It's just the
time.
enforcement that can be an issue. I would imagine if there's some repayment to be made, or
Yeah.
repairs or anything like that. You know.
And it depends what your PMA is involved in too. I call the PMA as the business model for the soul. Because when you form a PMA, you're forming it because you want to help mankind.
Yeah.
That's your service that you're offering. So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But there
Okay.
is
Well.
remedy. Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Well, we should have done this earlier, but we'll do it now. What exactly is a PMA? It stands for Private Member Association. I know that. Can you share a
Yeah.
little bit about its history? Where did it come from? And how are businesses using it today? And what are the benefits for
Right.
businesses that are in it, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
great questions. Thank you. Um, Private member associations are voluntary associations of men and women coming under a leader, someone who starts the PMA, in order to offer that service to mankind. And they have a history that goes back into 1500 BC. So it is not new. They have been around forever. Um, And in fact, the model that we're most familiar with was from the 1800s, 1800s in England. And that was where all of your hospitals, all of your churches, your orphanages, your homes, they were all private, meaning that they were done by a man or woman who started the group and looked after other men and women. And it was done from the heart, and that was where they started. And then what happened was the government saw that there was an opportunity to make money, so they kind of took over the private voluntary clubs or associations, and they pushed out the heart. I'll say it's the heart of the association, and they put it in for money. And so that's when we started getting incorporations,
Mhm.
incorporating a business. Now they had it in the commercial jurisdiction, the public jurisdiction, and it changed how we did things, you know. Like
Yeah.
all doctors were trained and apprenticed under a private member association up
Oh, I didn't know
until,
that.
oh yeah,
Mm.
up until they created medical schools, and the medical schools were taken over by the Rockefellers, who put in
Right.
big pharma. because
Right.
he was based in the oil industry and was making all his money. So he brought the oil industry into big pharma, and that's how that
Right.
happened. So it took it over. But private clubs and private memberships exist today. One of the most notorious private member associations are the Hells Angels. They're a
Oh,
private member
okay.
association. And you'll notice that the cops never go into a Hells Angels.
Yeah. I
Um,
just thought it's because 'cause they're big and scary, but it's
no,
for
it's
other
because
reasons?
that's private jurisdiction
Oh,
when
isn't
they're
that
in there.
interesting?
So they wait until the one they want leaves and goes out into the public, and
Right.
then they will tackle them. Another one is the Liberal Party of Canada, the Conservative Party of Canada. We're all familiar with private member golf courses,
Yes. I was gonna
you
say
know.
golf courses must be in this,
Yes,
category.
they are.
Yeah.
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 And it means that it's voluntary. You pay a due to be part of it, and you agree to the constitution of that private
Right.
member
'Cause
association.
yeah, because in a golf course, you have to wear a certain outfit, and I mean, I
Yeah.
don't golf, but I know
And
you
you
have to.
can't just go in and stop
Right.
in and have a meal at a country club.
No.
That you
No.
have to be invited by a member, and
Yes,
the
that's right.
member has agreed to all the rules, and
Right.
therefore they're expected to educate that visitor on those rules before they go in. And
Right.
that's the key. There's two parts of private member association. With the private member founder, you have to create the PMA and fully express what your purpose, your mission, and your service is. What are your benefits and your offerings to the other men and women who join you? And then
Right.
you also have to have administrative processes so that everybody knows the rules of the pool. Everybody
Mm,
knows what they have to do to be as a member in good standing and what they can expect the leaders to do.
right.
Okay, because the leaders are responsible. So David Edwards describes it as a family, with your founders as the head of the family, and then you invite and adopt all these others into that family. And that's how
Right.
he explains it, which is still a good analogy because that's
Yeah,
what you're
everyone's on the
doing.
same page. So you'd have to have a charter, and rules and,
Yeah, Constitution outlines all your rules.
constitution.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
that is where you actually outline, okay, this is what we do. This is how we do it. You have no violence, no theft. Here's your
Right.
expected behaviors, you know?
Right.
And then we also have disciplinary statement in the Constitution and the member agreement so that everybody comprehends what the disciplinary action will be should you violate that
Right.
Constitution or
Yeah,
you
very
cause
important.
harm. Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
very important to stay out of the public too if you can, in order
Yes.
to have that
That's why you
recourse.
have to have a
Yeah.
exactly, that's why I put it in. You have to have a private dispute resolution process. That
Yeah.
way, they don't have the ability to intercede. The only time that a judge will ever say he has some kind of ability to interfere with your PMA is if they can prove there was a legal reason
Mm.
or a legal breach. And that's the only way. So by keeping all your
Mhm.
paperwork in order and ensuring that all your members comprehend what's expected of them and what the
Mhm.
consequences of their behavior is, should they choose to violate the Constitution, then you
Mhm.
don't have to worry because that's all being done privately and everybody is on
Mhm.
board and everybody autographed and agreed to these when they put their autograph on the member agreement.
Right. Right. Okay, so thank you for that brief history and, some examples. So just so everyone knows, the Hells Angels, we know what they do, but you don't have to be involved in stuff
Yeah.
like that to create a
No.
PMA. It's not about that, right? It's not illegal, it's not unlawful to have a
Yeah.
PMA, right?
Right.
And hopefully you're acting in honor and, upholding natural law, the actual law,
Yeah.
when you're doing this. But so how does this tie into licensing? Because you mentioned that doctors used to be trained under these PMAs,
Mhm.
which I know licensing is a public thing, right? And so how does licensing work in a PMA? Let's say I have a food truck or something like this, which requires a health license, as you would know because you owned a bakery tea house.
Mhm.
So how would I start a PMA if a license is required as a food truck? Would they actually leave me alone? Like, how would that work?
Well, a food truck is sort of a difficult one because that
Yeah.
does go into the public, and you want it in the public because you want to
Oh,
attract,
gotcha.
sufficient ones. Some businesses, do not do well in the private domain. If you have to have constantly new, ones, and you need to advertise out into the
Gotcha.
public in order to bring in, uh, revenue, then no, it won't do as well. Where
Okay.
we're finding is if, a doctor chooses to go and create a private health association, a PHA, they are not practicing as a doctor. They are going in there as a man or a woman who has specific education skills and abilities that they're offering to those who wish to join them, and you invite men and women to become part of your private member association. So they don't use the word doctor. There is no doctor patient relationship. There's
Mhm.
no nurse patient relationship. That doesn't exist in the private. In the private, it's just man to man, woman to woman. So it's not, you don't have any licensing. You're not seeking permission to do anything. You are just
Mhm.
doing it. And so some doctors, have actually created a clinic where if you walk through one door, you're walking through as a patient and they're practicing as a doctor. Then they have another door in the clinic that says members only, private
Mm.
property, and when you go through there, you're not going through as a patient, you're going through as a member of the PMA, and you're seeking the advice of the founder because you
Okay.
trust their knowledge, their skills, and their advice. And so you want to do that. Now, a doctor that is using the PMA model cannot prescribe because that requires a license, which is why
Mm.
many doctors. I had a lovely woman. She had a practice. She was a doctor in Ontario, licensed in Ontario and Quebec, and she chose to give up her license in Quebec but keep it in Ontario, so she was able to get her members, if they needed medical advice, going in and getting that. So
Gotcha.
they could still keep their license, but they couldn't bring that license into the PMA.
Mm. I
They would
see.
have to refer any private members that maybe they needed a diagnostic or they needed, like, I used, my homeopath was also a medical doctor, which was
Yep.
wonderful because I was able to get both treatments when I had an injury,
Mhm.
and so it's a lovely blend
Mhm.
that you can use. And because when you are in a PMA, there's no licensing, no registration, no taxes. You do not
Yeah.
collect GST or HST, nor do you pay any tax because it's a private
Private agreement.
yeah. And so
Yeah.
you have no interference, and you're not taking any public support or public monies, and that's
Mhm.
important. So you don't start your PMA on a government grant. You can't
No,
do that.
you
you
can't.
know no,
Yeah.
because that would be public, and therefore you would have to sign and do all of their things. And a
Right.
lot of folks say, well, I'm nonprofit, I'm in the private. No, you're not. If you're a nonprofit and you are taking grants and monies from the public jurisdiction, you have voluntarily
Mm.
chosen to work in the public, and therefore you will follow their rules and
Yeah.
you will follow what they say. So you are not a private association. You are a nonprofit registered association, if that's the
Right.
way you went. And you can't commingle. You can't do
No.
both. It doesn't work because the minute you stray into the public, you are now subject to all those rules and regulations and statutes and mandates and stuff,
Yeah.
which is why a lot of there was a huge movement of
Mhm.
health, folks that had health practices, they moved into the private because of the overreach. They didn't want the mask mandate. They didn't want the enforced shots, and all of those things. So they moved into the private where the government did not have any overreach,
Mhm.
and actually a lot of restaurants went that way too,
Mm,
because they
interesting.
didn't want the enforcement of masks mandates, or the enforcement of vaccines and stuff like that, or the
Mhm.
shot, um, because it was their choice, and they just said, no, we're not going to do that. And they were constantly getting bombarded and ticketed and everything, and they had no protection. Whereas if it was members only, private property, members only, and your signage is very important,
Yes.
um, that you have that, and you have proof that you are operating in the private, that the only folks that are coming in are those that are in a member agreement with you, then they have no right, because you can stop them at the door and say, you are not a member. See this sign, members only, private property, trespass will be fined. And so you have that right there, and that's how you
Mm.
can get rid of. And we've had a couple of PMAs that I worked with, and they have had the police at their door, and they have repelled them successfully.
Oh,
You
wow.
know, so that's
Okay.
important to know. And it was a big part, the signage, and knowing and being confident in what you're presenting, that you are
Mhm.
not doing anything under the radar or behind the
Yeah.
scenes. You're doing what is quite lawful and legitimate. You are not doing anything you have to hide from. Or I don't mean you go out there and put a target on your back and say, nah, 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 look at me, I'm in the private
Right.
domain. But you still, you have got lawful
Yeah.
ability to repel. And
Right.
that was, I think, one of the biggest fears that a lot of the
Yeah.
folks I was working with had, excuse me, was the fact that they would be, the cops would come and take over, and they would be penalized. But in
Yeah.
fact, we had one, they were telling me they had put the signage on their gate, and the cop had come down and was leaning over the gate looking at them in the living room, and they just you know and but
Mm.
never came past that gate, never moved past it, because they
Wow.
had to respect. you know and we know
But
we've moved
yeah.
into rather lawless times, and they don't always
Yeah.
respect it, and there's no
No.
100% guarantee for anything,
No.
you know
No.
but you have a
No.
lot more than if you didn't have that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good to know. So it sounds like it would work on your private residence as well. If they're looking in the
Mhm.
living room, you can do that. Mm,
Oh, yeah.
okay. So
Well, he had a private health, and he had
yeah.
formerly been a doctor, a naturopathic doctor, and he'd given up that, and he had just moved into this private member. So it was really interesting, and
Yeah.
I think we had another one who he was brilliant. Um, he put his signage on his window of his door, and he wrote his script on the back of the of
Oh,
the
yeah.
the signage, so when the cop came
Yep.
to the door, he had the script right there, to be a non-aggressive way, non-belligerent, just to stay calm, stay centered, and assert his private
Right.
rights. And
Right.
that's exactly what he did, and they went away. They did leave. They didn't come any further. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it seems like, I think sometimes law enforcers, they might not know about this as much as the judges. The judges would definitely know about the private domain and not crossing into that, but sometimes there's a disconnect. I've, you know, heard from other people that
yeah.
sometimes the
Well,
ones, walking the beat, they don't always know about this, and they
Well,
tend to
but amazingly, they all know they can't go into the Hells Angels because
well,
it's
yeah.
private.
Well,
They
again,
can't.
if you're burly,
Yeah,
Hell's
yeah.
Angel, then maybe that's on your side for that type of thing,
Not
but yeah,
really, they just know. Cops do know, they know more than you think. And
I
when it
guess.
says members only private property, that is a notice, and they have to pay attention to notices. So with the
Mm,
PMA, you're putting anybody from the public jurisdiction, you're putting them on notice that this is private jurisdiction beyond this door.
right,
And that's
right.
that's why it's so important to have signage, because these are your notices to all of those engaged in public policy enforcement,
Yeah,
that this is their notice, and they do learn that when they have a notice, they have to pay attention to a notice. Because
yeah.
if they dragged you in and they said anything, you say, well, I had given you notice, the notice was
Right.
right there, you read it, you ignored it, you're the one in violation,
Mm. Mhm. Yeah,
even by
that's
your
true.
own rules and your own statutes.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
That makes
yeah.
sense. That
Mm.
makes sense. So it sounds like, a PMA is a good option for anyone who has recurring, customers or clients that come back and repeat business
Yeah.
mostly? Yeah, like health organizations. What other kinds of businesses have you seen starting a PMA successfully?
Um, well, we've had restaurants,
Restaurant. Yeah.
a distribution business. They were not allowed under the Canadian government to distribute their product in Canada, only
Mm,
internationally. So I helped set up a distribution PMA so they
mm.
could distribute to members only. And that was it. I did, um, I'm trying to think what some of the others are. Private communities are starting. Like
Yes.
working with one in Northern Ontario, and there's one in Quebec that I'm working that actually are there now, and they are connecting with Dee Dee. But private communities are starting to come up and saying our whole community is private. Stay out of here. We're
Mm,
going to live our lives the way we want to. Private education. I've helped.
mhm,
There's private education, private clubs, social clubs are very popular. Anything that is, like if you have a community kitchen or a community garden, this is a
mm,
good aspect of it.
yeah,
There's also I'm trying to think, there's so many different avenues that you can take. Any entrepreneurial one that you have that you're offering, you can have that as a private. And be private living and working in the private domain with the PMA doesn't mean you can't talk to the public, but it
right,
means you have to be careful what you say in the public, you know?
right, yeah.
So you can have a website, as you know, because thank
Yeah, I
you,
was gonna bring
Angela,
that up.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
for doing such a great job of diving in about how to divide
yeah,
between the public facing and the private facing. So
yeah.
you
So
you
things
know
like
you
pricing would have to be private, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
And your membership agreement, your
yeah,
constitutional agreement, that would all be in the private portal part of any website. But on your website, you can put your vision, your mission, but not details of your benefits and offerings, just a high level, and then
mhm,
join now, join now. So you would have a join now button, which would take them to the application process to become a member of that
mhm,
PMA. And members are invited. It's not like Costco. That people say, well, Costco's are a membership association. Well, they're a public member association. You pay your money and they don't care who you are. They just give
right,
you the club card.
right.
So whereas a
And
PMA
everything
is
else
by
is
invitation. Yeah.
yeah, and their pricing is public too, for the most part. I mean, I have gone on there and have had to log
Yeah.
into their website to see it, but
Well, they
for the
did.
most part, it's public.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know how Costco came into being?
No,
They
I don't.
went they went to all the wholesalers and they said, If we do this as a private club,
Yeah.
or as a club, then we'll bring all your products in, but we won't charge the full price. We're going to keep it more closely related to your wholesale price. And the wholesalers decided that this was a good avenue to get their product
Mm,
out. So that's how Costco came into being. It was all negotiation with the
mm.
wholesalers, and the
Yeah.
wholesalers all agreed to be part of this and to
Mm,
ensure that they sold their product to them at
mm,
a good wholesale price, and they didn't expect that they put it at a certain markup that we
mhm.
expect in the industry.
Hmm,
That's how
interesting. I
Costco
didn't
came
know
into
that.
being. Yeah, but it was an
No, I didn't
agreement.
know that. Okay, well, that's a lot of good information about PMAs, and we've cleared up a couple of things that might have been misconceptions, like,
Mhm.
you're doing something illegal or things like that. Is there anything else that you hear as myths or misconceptions about PMAs that you'd like to clear up for us?
I think that people think that if you're doing a private member association, you are extremely restricted,
Okay.
in what how you can bring in members. There are certain things you have to do as the founder because it's your job to keep your members safe and your membership safe. It's up to you as the founder to protect it. It's like anybody that's the head of a family. Your job as head of the family is to protect that family. So you do have things, but that's what the paperwork is all about. And that's
Mhm.
why you do that, is because it gives you the confidence to stay private. And that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing that I think happens with private member associations, is learning that internal confidence to step into
Mhm.
your own power, to step into your own um, self governance. And as a
Yeah.
consequence, when you're in your self governance, you are training all your members to the same thing, you know?
Yeah.
So it's got
Yeah.
beautiful side effects. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like what you mentioned at the beginning about, growing up really from
Yeah.
child to adult and taking responsibility, and
Yes.
accountability for your own actions, not waiting on somebody else to come save you
Yeah.
and putting it all on somebody else, right? It's like we
Yeah.
all are
Yeah.
adults here. We need to
Yeah.
own what we do and don't do, right? Instead of
Exactly.
putting that off, like outsourcing
Yeah.
that. So,
Right, and
yeah.
that's why the public jurisdiction don't like it, because we're
Yeah.
not looking because we also are not looking to them for, funding. We're not looking to them to come in and tell us how to be so we can get their dollars. We're actually saying, I think the biggest misconception, now that I think of it, is that
Yeah.
PMAs can't earn, sufficient compensation to survive.
Mm.
If I am the founder of a PMA, I would expect that you have sufficient compensation to keep a roof over your head, to feed yourself, to look after your offspring. I would expect all that to be part of it, you know?
Mhm.
So we don't expect you to give away everything for free.
Right, it's not a
That's
charity or a nonprofit, it can be an actual business. You can
it
actually
is
you
a
can,
business. It's the business for
yeah,
the
have
soul.
income.
It's
Yeah,
how
yeah.
you have chosen to present your skills
Mhm.
and gifts to other men and women so that they can compensate you for that. And the
That's awesome.
compensation can be, here's the beauty, unlike a lot of businesses, your compensation can take the form of barter. It can take
Right.
the form of actual currency if you are doing that. It can also take crypto. I
Mhm.
know some PMAs that have been, they accept
Mhm.
everything in crypto. So
Yeah.
so it's
Well,
completely up to you. One is dealing in silver and gold, so money of
interesting.
substance. So
Yeah.
it's completely your decision about how you want that compensation to take back. And maybe it's a barter. Maybe
Yeah.
one PMA bartered that they would, on their PMA, they were producing honey, and so
Mm.
they bartered the rent, the property that their PMA was sitting on, they bartered it with honey. So that was
Yeah.
the agreement between the landlord and those that run the PMA, because it was top-notch honey, beautiful honey,
Mm.
you know? And so that was what they did. They said, and the ones that owned the property that the PMA was operating on, they they put up the signage, and they even put up a couple of gates just to ensure that this part of the
Mhm.
orchard was the private area. So,
Ah, I see.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, a PMA, there's no limit to a PMA because there's no limit to our creativity, and that's what
Yeah,
you're doing in a
exactly.
PMA. You are
Yeah.
expanding your creativity.
Yeah, we're creators, right? We're meant to
We
do that,
are.
and as
Yeah,
long as we all agree, then that's what we agree upon, right? That's what the
yeah,
members agree
yeah,
upon, that's how it's done,
and which is
and
why the founders vet who goes into their
yes,
PMA.
yes,
Okay,
I've
there's a
created a few
screening
websites
process.
for yeah, I've created a few
Yeah,
websites for PMAs, and there's always some questions to ask beforehand,
yeah,
and then a meet and greet usually, and
yeah.
then usually you pay a fee to join the PMA. Is that always the
A
case
membership
or
due. Yeah, they're
a
called
due?
member
Yeah,
dues, and
yeah.
those are critical because that's part of staying in the private. That was
Oh.
part of the judge where the judge can't interfere because member dues are paid. That's why there must be a member due
Can
that
it be
is.
paid by, any means, like honey or crypto? Yeah?
Yeah, up to you
Yeah?
how you want it,
Okay.
as long as a member due, as long as there's been an exchange of energy
Of
and
value and energy,
money
yeah.
is, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And
Because
so,
money is in the public, so that's an interesting concept
yeah,
that it would help keep you in the private, but if you're exchanging, you know,
it's energy
promissory
exchange.
notes,
Yeah.
it's energy
Well,
exchange.
that's all we have, that's all money
Yeah,
is, right?
I
It's
know,
just
it's true.
there's no
For now.
substance.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
and you can have your member due is up to you on how you set it. You can set it monthly, you can set it once in a
Okay.
lifetime, you
Oh,
can
okay.
set it
That's good to know.
weekly. It's up to you as the founder about how you want those member dues,
Yeah.
exchanged. Yeah,
Yeah, so what
and
I'm getting from all this is, like, we have to take our mindset off of always asking for permission to do something, and we're creating what we
yeah,
want, right? So it can be all these things or any of these
yeah,
things. It's up
yeah,
to us, really. We're not going out and asking daddy
yeah.
for permission to do
Exactly.
anything in
We're
this model.
exchanging our
Yeah,
energy for some energy of another.
yeah,
And so
yes,
your energy takes multiple forms.
yeah,
Energy can be anything, as long as there is a form of compensation for what you're offering. And that's the
right.
key, you know.
Equal
And so,
consideration for all parties, yeah.
yeah,
Yep,
it's learning a new language. That's a big
it
part of
really is.
PME.
Yeah,
You can't use legalese. You really do
yeah,
need to learn the words of the private and the words of lawful, natural law, not
right,
legal. Yeah. So
right.
that's an important part. So we spend when I do my course, we spend the first day just talking about visualizing and really learning what are you offering, and then we talk about the wording and we talk about scripts and things to keep you in the private
Mm,
domain
right, 'cause
outside of the
the
public.
language you use matters, I know that, and
Oh yeah.
it's a lot to wrap your head around, so please tell us more about your course. I know you've got one going on currently.
Yeah.
Are there plans for a next one, or where can
Yes,
people
I'm
find out
going to be
more?
doing them probably once a month, and
Okay.
I've got this one started in April. It will end this Saturday, and I do them. It's all via Zoom because I have folks from all over
Mhm.
who enroll in it, and it is 3 weeks. So you do 3 full days, but between the weeks you have homework. So you have to
Okay.
do your homework, and then we go into that the following week, and this is the final week, so they all get to present their PMAs to each other this week, so that'll be exciting. I can't wait
Yeah,
to hear what they come up
yeah,
with because it's,
yeah, that's
it's really their time to shine, because
mhm.
when you are, it's like any business that you do, you need to be able to encourage those to join. So
Yeah.
you have to have a good way to succinctly present your
Mhm.
private member association, what it means, what are they going to benefit, what are you offering, and how does it work. So you're constantly educating men and women on what is the private, what does it mean, private member agreement.
Yeah.
So it's, so those are all things that you learn in the course. And I have all the paperwork templates. So we walk through the
Mhm.
templates about, okay, this is what a member agreement needs to have in it. This is what a constitution needs to have in it. And this is what an article of association has. And the article of association is it's the only paperwork that you may share if you want to set up a bank account, a non-bear interest bearing, non-sin connected bank
Yeah.
account. That's the only thing that you would use it, unless you're dealing with your PMA as a trust, in which case you
Mhm.
would have a trust account that you could
Right.
have there. Yeah.
Right. That's great that you help with all of that because it can get a little confusing. There's lots to unlearn before you learn. Is that not true?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very true. Yeah. And
Lots of stuff.
I don't teach PMA trust. That is
Right.
not I'm doing trusts and I'm learning trust along with equity and a few other things. However, I never want to teach something that I haven't done myself or have tried, because I
Yeah.
think that that's only fair to those that are wanting to, participate, that you should
Mm.
be able to talk, walk your talk that you're
Of course.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that makes
that's
sense. That makes a lot of
my
sense.
philosophy. And I
Yeah,
love
absolutely.
teaching. That's something I just adore doing.
Yes, well, I've
So,
taken a course of yours too, and it was
oop,
a lot
I
of
don't
great
hear you,
information.
Angela.
Oh, can you hear me now? No? Oh, I think it's just you maybe.
No,
No? Hmm. I will
we've
switch
lost you.
my Oh, no. Okay.
Yeah. I'm pretty good at lip reading, but
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
oh, it's coming back. You're
Yeah, I'm
there,
just
but
on my
distant.
so I'll put this away. Um,
Oh,
I'm just on this other speaker. Oh, no, you can't hear me. All right. Well, we'll wrap up, I guess, but,
oh, maybe it
here,
was me. I don't
I
know.
think
Could
let
have
me
just
just
been
let's
me, Angela.
can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yeah?
perfectly. But
Okay.
I think I may have leaned on
Oh, yes.
my
Yeah, because
my
this
own
this
volume.
microphone's pretty good. It doesn't usually
Yeah,
give
it's
out on
really
me,
good.
so
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being on with me today. I want to send people to you if they wanna learn more, so I know we have your Facebook up here,
Yeah. Mhm.
L-J Coté
Yep.
on Facebook if they wanna
Thank you.
DM you. You've got a website that's coming soon, Equity Prevails.
Prevails.
I'm gonna
Yep.
put that on the screen as well here. So
It's not published
equityprevails.com.
yet. Yeah.
Not published yet, but coming soon. And where else can you have a book, which I'm going to mention here as well. So I'll
Oh,
put
yeah.
the
My book
cover
is very
on,
different. Yeah. Yeah.
called The
I
Real Me.
published
No
this in
Yeah.
2017. The Real Me.
Okay.
No apologies, no people pleasing, no excuse for what you are. This was when I did my deep dive when I was living in Hawaii. I went very much into, who am I? What am I? What does it what why am I here? And so this is a little workbook, and I mean little, it's not a big book, it's just a very small book.
Yeah.
And so you read what I term spiritual tutorials. So you read what I did and what I learned, and then there's questions after each one to get you to dive in and do your
Oh,
own
that's great.
thought. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great foundational work. So, where can people get that book?
It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any of those. It was published through the Balboa. Yeah,
Mm, okay.
self-published. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Any other links you wanna mention before we sign off that
Well,
where people
maybe
can
my
find you?
email address, because that's probably one of the best ways to get me. And
Okay, well, I
that's
don't know if you
just
wanna put that on here publicly, but we can I mean, it's up to
yeah.
you. Um,
Well, let's leave it with Facebook for now, and then they
let's do
can direct
Facebook.
message me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, and then your website will be up soon. Your
Yeah.
book can be found online as well,
And
and,
actually related to my book, I have
yeah.
another website called soulgifts.org, and that one is just in the process of being published. I haven't quite got there
Oh,
yet,
cool.
but that
Very
will be
cool.
my soul realignment work that I do on that one. Yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you, a woman of many talents, for coming on my show.
And Angela, I have to
Yeah.
say thank you for diving into the private side of websites. That
Oh,
was so
yes.
good. It's so nice to be able to refer, uh,
Yeah.
men and women in the course to someone who can help them develop. Not only that, but your beautiful branding as well really
Oh,
helps.
thank you. Thank you. I really enjoy doing that for folks, and, yeah,
Yeah,
I guess I could plug my shameless plug for myself here. If you want to learn more about
absolutely.
how I can help you with that, go to beboldbranding.com, and, I can absolutely help you create a PMA website. Thanks to Laura Jane, I know all about what needs to go where and all that stuff, so you can be compliant with all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, thank you so much, LJ, for joining me today. It was
Well,
a really
thank you for
enlightening
having
talk.
me. It's
Yeah,
been
amazing.
great. I really appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, thank you. It's always good to chat with you. And, thanks all for joining me. If you have any questions, reach out to LJ or myself, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye for now.